In October 2023, Israeli ground forces entered Gaza City. They were expecting tunnels. Everyone knew about the tunnels. Hamas had been digging them for years, smuggling routes, weapon storage, hiding places. But what they found underneath wasn't just tunnels, it was something else entirely. An underground network so vast, so sophisticated, that it forced military analysts to completely rewrite their understanding of this conflict. We're not talking about holes in the ground. We're talking about a subterranean city with electricity, ventilation systems, command centers, living quarters, some tunnels 80 meters deep, deeper than subway systems in major cities. And the scale? The Israeli Defense Forces now estimate there are over 500 kilometers of tunnels beneath Gaza. That's longer than the entire New York City subway system, built under one of the most densely populated places on Earth, without anyone noticing the scale until now. So how did this happen? Why did it take 17 years to understand what was really being built? And what does this discovery actually mean for everything happening right now? Let's explain. To understand what Israel found, you need to know three things. First, Gaza is 365 square kilometers. That's roughly twice the size of Washington, D.C., but it holds 2.3 million people, making it one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Second, Hamas has controlled Gaza since 2007. For 17 years, they've been the governing authority. They control the borders, the infrastructure, the imports, the construction permits, everything. Third, during those 17 years, Gaza received billions in international aid. Money meant for hospitals, schools, water systems, housing. The international community sent concrete, steel, fuel, equipment, all with one purpose: rebuild Gaza's civilian infrastructure after decades of conflict. But something else was being built, and it wasn't schools. In 2021, during an 11-day conflict, Israel discovered a handful of tunnels. They destroyed them and moved on. Standard operating procedure: Hamas digs tunnels. Israel finds them. Hamas digs more. But in 2023, when ground forces finally entered Gaza City, they realized something terrifying. Those weren't isolated tunnels. They were entry points to a network that sprawled beneath nearly the entire strip, and what they found down there changed everything. Let's go back to 2007. When Hamas took control of Gaza, they inherited a destroyed territory. Years of conflict had left the infrastructure in ruins. Power grid barely functional, water system collapsing, roads destroyed. The international community offered help. Qatar pledged hundreds of millions. The EU sent aid packages. The UN coordinated reconstruction. Egypt opened construction material crossings, and Hamas said, "We're rebuilding." Just not what anyone thought. See, here's what nobody understood at the time. Hamas wasn't just a militant group. They were thinking like a state. And states prepare for war. Not next month's war, not next year's war. The war they know is inevitable. So while the international community watched construction trucks roll into Gaza, Hamas was executing one of the most audacious military engineering projects in modern history. They were building a fortress underground. The first tunnels were simple: smuggling routes under the Egyptian border in Rafah, moving weapons, money, supplies. Israel knew about these. Everyone did. But in 2012, something changed. Hamas stopped digging small smuggling tunnels. They started digging strategic infrastructure, tunnels wide enough for vehicles, reinforced with concrete, the same concrete meant for hospitals, equipped with electrical systems, powered by fuel meant for generators in schools, ventilated with industrial fans, bought with funds meant for civilian infrastructure. And they didn't just dig down, they built an entire logistical network. Command centers 40 meters underground, deeper than most military bunkers. Living quarters with beds, kitchens, bathrooms. Weapons storage facilities the size of warehouses. Communication hubs with server rooms and encrypted networks. Medical facilities for treating wounded fighters without surfacing. And here's the part that Israeli intelligence missed for over a decade. The tunnels weren't just military infrastructure, they were civilian infrastructure too. Hospitals had tunnel entrances in basements. Schools had access shafts hidden in storage rooms. Mosques connected to tunnel networks. Residential homes with false floors leading down. This wasn't accidental. This was strategy. Because if your military infrastructure is inseparable from civilian infrastructure, attacking it becomes politically, legally, and morally complicated. Hamas wasn't just building tunnels. They were building a defense strategy that used Gaza's population as an integrated shield. But the scale, nobody understood the scale. Until October 2023, when Hamas launched the largest attack on Israel in 50 years, Israel responded with a ground invasion. And for the first time, soldiers stayed underground long enough to map what they were seeing. And what they found was staggering. This wasn't a tunnel network. This was an underground city dot, and it explained everything. Here's what most people don't understand about tunnel warfare. It's not new. The Viet Cong used tunnels against American forces in Vietnam. The scale was massive, hundreds of kilometers. But those were rural tunnels, dug in jungle and farmland, away from population centers. What Hamas built is different. They built tunnels under cities, under hospitals, under schools, under homes where 2.3 million people live their daily lives. And they did this for one reason: asymmetric warfare. Hamas cannot defeat Israel in conventional warfare. Israel has one of the most advanced militaries on earth: air superiority, naval power, armor, artillery, intelligence, technology. Hamas has none of that. So they changed the battlefield. If the fight happens on the surface, Hamas loses immediately. Israeli drones see everything. Tanks dominate urban combat. Airstrikes eliminate any concentration of fighters. But underground, drones can't fly. Tanks can't maneuver. Air superiority means nothing. Satellites are useless. Underground, the advantages flip. Hamas knows the tunnel layout. Israeli forces don't. Hamas controls the lighting. Israeli forces need flashlights. Hamas chooses when to engage. Israeli forces move blind. Hamas can ambush, retreat, and disappear. Israeli forces can't pursue without massive risk. And this is why the tunnel network is so important. It's not about hiding, it's about leveling the playing field. But there's another layer to this. The tunnels aren't just tactical, they're strategic. See, Israel's entire military doctrine is built on speed and precision. Quick operations, surgical strikes, minimal casualties. Get in, eliminate the threat, get out. But tunnels break that model. You can't do surgical strikes on a target 60 meters underground. You can't get in and out quickly when every tunnel might be booby-trapped. You can't minimize casualties when every corner could hide an ambush. Tunnel warfare is slow. It's dangerous. It's costly. It requires specialized training, specialized equipment, massive intelligence gathering, controlled demolitions, risk of collapse, risk of flooding, risk of chemical weapons use in confined spaces. And most importantly, it takes time. And time is what Hamas needs. Because the longer a conflict lasts, the more international pressure builds on Israel to stop. The more casualties mount, the more the humanitarian crisis worsens, the more political will erodes. This is the strategic genius and horror of the tunnel network. Hamas built a system that forces Israel into a long, costly, politically damaging conflict. Even if Israel eventually wins militarily, the cost in lives and resources and international standing makes victory Pyrrhic. And here's the darkest part. Every tunnel entrance in a hospital, every command center under a school, every weapons cache beneath a residential building. These aren't accidents. They're choices, deliberate choices that ensure any Israeli attempt to destroy the tunnels will result in civilian casualties. Because if Israel targets the tunnels, they hit the buildings above them. If they don't target the tunnels, Hamas remains operational indefinitely. It's a strategic calculation designed to make every Israeli military option morally and politically costly. And the international community? They funded it. Not intentionally, but effectively. Every ton of concrete that was supposed to build a school, every generator meant for a hospital, every fuel shipment for civilian power. Hamas diverted a portion, sometimes a large portion, underground. The UN estimates that building the tunnel network required 800,000 tons of concrete, tens of thousands of tons of steel reinforcement, industrial excavation equipment, electrical wiring and components, ventilation systems, communication infrastructure, all of which entered Gaza under the label humanitarian reconstruction. And the people of Gaza? Many didn't know. Tunnels were dug at night. Entrance shafts hidden in private properties, sometimes without owner knowledge. Excavated soil mixed with construction waste or dumped at sea. For years, the international community assumed Hamas was corrupt and inefficient. Aid money disappearing into mismanagement. They weren't wrong about corruption. They were wrong about inefficiency. Hamas was incredibly efficient, just not at what the world thought they were building. They built 2 Gazas. One on the surface, barely functional, impoverished, struggling. One below, military grade, sophisticated, operational. And when Israeli forces finally understood the scale, everything changed. December 2023. The Israeli Defense Forces made an announcement that went largely unnoticed. They had found the Central Command Hub under Shifa Hospital. Shifa is the largest hospital in Gaza. It's protected under international law. Attacking it would be a war crime unless it's being used for military purposes. For weeks, Israel had claimed Hamas was using hospitals. The international community demanded proof. When Israeli forces entered Shifa, they found a tunnel entrance in the basement, leading to a network of rooms 20 meters underground. including a command center with communication equipment, sleeping quarters, weapon storage, computer servers, operational planning rooms, all underneath one of the most protected civilian structures in Gaza. This changed everything, because it confirmed what Israel had been saying and what the international community didn't want to believe. The tunnels weren't just near civilian infrastructure. They were integrated with civilian infrastructure by design, and this presented an impossible problem. How do you destroy a military target that's literally beneath a hospital? If you collapse the tunnels, you risk collapsing the building above. If you don't, the command center remains operational. Israel chose to go in carefully, slowly, evacuating patients first. But the damage to international perception was done. Images of Israeli forces in hospitals, regardless of context, looked like violations of humanitarian law. Hamas achieved exactly what they designed for. But the discovery at Shifa revealed something else. Something even more significant. When engineers mapped the tunnel network beneath Shifa, they found connections. Dozens of them leading to other hospitals, other schools, other residential blocks. The entire northern Gaza Strip was connected underground. You could enter a tunnel in one neighborhood and emerge kilometers away, without ever surfacing. This explained how Hamas fighters kept disappearing. They weren't retreating, they were repositioning, using a network that allowed them to move across Gaza entirely underground, invisible to drones, satellites, or surveillance. And the scale kept growing. Every week, Israeli forces discovered new sections, deeper tunnels, larger facilities, more sophisticated engineering. In January 2024, they found tunnels 80 meters deep. That's 26 stories underground. Deeper than the foundation of most skyscrapers. Some sections had blast doors, steel reinforced, hydraulically sealed, designed to survive bunker-buster bombs. Others had flooding systems to trap Israeli forces if they entered. This wasn't militia infrastructure. This was nation-state level military engineering, and it forced a realization. This conflict couldn't be won quickly, because the real battlefield wasn't Gaza's surface. It was what lay beneath. And destroying it, truly destroying it, could take years. So what does this mean for the world? First, it changes how we understand modern urban warfare. Every military on Earth is studying what's happening in Gaza, because tunnel warfare at this scale, in this density, has never been seen before. The US military is taking notes. Russia is taking notes. China is taking notes. Because the lesson is clear. If you're facing a superior military force, go underground. We're already seeing it. The Ukrainian military has studied Hamas's tunnel tactics. Not to copy them, but to understand how Russia might use similar strategies in occupied cities. Hezbollah in Lebanon has had tunnels for years. They're now reportedly expanding them, using Gaza as a case study. Even non-state actors in Syria and Iraq are observing. The Gaza tunnel network proves something dangerous. With enough time, enough resources, and enough willingness to sacrifice civilian safety, you can build a military structure that's nearly impossible to destroy without massive collateral damage. Second, it changes the politics of aid. For decades, the international community operated on trust. Aid goes in. We assume it's used for humanitarian purposes. Gaza proved that assumption can be catastrophically wrong. Now, every aid package to conflict zones faces scrutiny. How do we ensure concrete goes to schools, not tunnels? How do we verify fuel powers hospitals, not ventilation systems for military bunkers? Some countries are demanding on-site monitoring. Others are restricting dual-use materials entirely. The entire humanitarian aid system is being forced to reckon with the fact that good intentions can fund military infrastructure. Third, it changes the legal landscape. International humanitarian law prohibits using civilian infrastructure for military purposes. It's called perfidy, a war crime. But what happens when military infrastructure is so deeply integrated with civilian infrastructure that they're inseparable? Is bombing a hospital with a command center underneath legal? Is it legal if civilians are evacuated first? What if evacuation isn't possible? These aren't theoretical questions anymore. They're being tested in The Hague right now. And the answers will define the rules of war for the next century. Fourth, it changes the human cost calculus. Gaza's civilian population has suffered immensely. Over 30,000 killed, hundreds of thousands displaced, infrastructure destroyed, and much of that destruction is directly connected to the tunnel network beneath. When you build military infrastructure beneath civilian infrastructure, you make the civilian infrastructure a target. Who bears responsibility? Israel for targeting the tunnels? Hamas for placing them under civilian areas? The international community for unknowingly funding them? There are no clean answers, only tragedy. And finally, it changes the timeline for peace. Every ceasefire negotiation now includes a question that wasn't there before. What happens to the tunnels? Israel demands they be destroyed. Hamas refuses, their defensive infrastructure. And without resolving that question, any ceasefire is temporary. Because as long as the tunnels exist, Hamas retains the capacity to launch attacks. And as long as Hamas retains that capacity, Israel maintains the justification for military operations. The tunnels have become the physical manifestation of an unresolved conflict. Buried dot, hidden dot, but defining everything above ground. So what happens next? There are three possible scenarios. Scenario 1, complete destruction. Israel continues operations until the entire tunnel network is destroyed. This could take years. The human cost would be catastrophic. Tens of thousands more casualties, military and civilian. Gaza's infrastructure would be reduced to rubble. But even if successful, there's a problem. You can't unteach the knowledge. Hamas fighters who survive will know how to build tunnels. They'll know the strategy works. And in 10 years, 15 years, they or a new group could build again. Unless Gaza remains under permanent occupation. Which brings its own impossible costs. Scenario 2, negotiated disarmament. A peace deal is reached. Hamas agrees to dismantle the tunnels in exchange for political concessions. International monitors verify compliance. This is the optimistic scenario. But it requires trust. Trust that Hamas will actually dismantle the tunnels. Trust that Israel will honor political agreements. Trust that international monitors can verify what's happening 60 meters underground. And after decades of conflict, that trust doesn't exist. Scenario 3, frozen conflict. Neither side achieves their goals. The tunnels remain partially intact. Gaza remains partially destroyed. Hamas remains weakened but operational. Israel maintains security control but not peace. This is the most likely scenario. Because conflicts like this rarely end decisively. They freeze, they simmer, they flare up again years later. The tunnels become a permanent feature of the landscape. A reminder that beneath the surface, the conflict continues. But there's a fourth possibility, one that nobody's discussing yet. What if the tunnel network changes military thinking permanently? What if 20 years from now, tunnel warfare becomes standard in urban conflict zones? What if every non-state actor with enough time and resources starts building underground? We could be witnessing the birth of a new era of warfare, where battles happen in two dimensions, the visible world above ground, and the invisible world below. And if that happens, the discovery in Gaza won't just change this conflict. It will change all conflicts forever. So what did Israel find under Gaza? They found a city beneath a city. 500 kilometers of tunnels, hospitals above, command centers below, schools above, weapons storage below, homes above, battlefields below. They found the physical manifestation of asymmetric warfare. A strategy that turns civilian infrastructure into military advantage. A defense that uses population density as a shield. They found 17 years of diverted aid. Concrete meant for rebuilding, used for war-making. International goodwill, converted into military capacity. But most importantly, they found the future. Because what's happening in Gaza isn't staying in Gaza. Militaries worldwide are learning. Non-state actors are adapting. The rules of war are being rewritten in real time. And the lesson is terrifying. If you're willing to sacrifice enough, civilian safety, international law, humanitarian norms, you can build something that even the most powerful militaries struggle to destroy. The tunnels under Gaza changed everything. Not because they're unprecedented, but because they're replicable. And that's what makes this discovery so significant. It's not just about one conflict. It's about every conflict to come.